Hey everyone, new week, new Dev Diary, and buckle up because it's a big one. It is perhaps the biggest one. Historical Japan, finally some new stuff, and it's good stuff. First of all, if you're interested in this Dev Diary, I'll leave a link down below. It is a fairly long one. I might misinterpret some things. I might get some stuff wrong. If you're interested in these, I recommend reading them yourself. They're quite good, they're quite extensive, and this is really a long one. So I'm gonna try and keep it fairly succinct. First of all, Japanese situation in 1936 is far different from what we know and love from the OG game, as well as the Waking the Tiger expansion that gave a little bit of a change to it. So there are now new leaders. It's no longer just the emperor in charge, who's really in charge of nothing. We start with the historical prime minister of 1936, Keisuke Okada, and he's not great. Also, Japan now starts out as non-aligned, which is a little more representative of what the country was all about in this stage of, well, no war yet. So 1936, it has a slide down into fascism later on, but not yet. It doesn't start out that way, and this is more accurate way of representing it. And it does look like they have changed some of the UIs for the faction mechanic as well. I'm looking forward to that Dev Diary. First off, Imperial Army. Everything is shit. Obviously, we can't have a country update without having the country made so much worse than it has been in base game, and then you have to use the focus tree to build it back up. I don't like that, but at least it's a consistent approach. So you can see there's like some Japanese armor stuff, tanks. Japan does not do tanks apparently, and couple of positives, mostly negatives. They are more or less historical in that Japanese armor really not that great, never really was. Japan's strength lay in the infantryman with his rifle and his grenades. Japanese artillery, Japanese armor was always second rate at best. So there is also the Imperial Navy, very much still stuck in a somewhat outdated mindset of the decisive battle. Everything must be thrown at the enemy at once in one big decisive battle. Kantai Kessen, the decisive battle stratagem, did not work out for them historically, but that means a couple of things. Now these numbers are all, they're not final, and there are ways to, make the red numbers go away or make the green numbers go up. So you're not just locked into this, but I can see that you might not be super enthusiastic if you load up Japan for the first time after this. So it's flavorful, I suppose. It's not all bad, I guess. So yeah, Army and Air Naval Services. Japan did not have an independent air force. It had an Army Air Wing and a Naval Air Wing. And they hated each other, they did not trust each other, and if one side came up with a better airplane design, the other side did not automatically get it. That was some inter-service and inter-branch rivalry right there. So that is represented here. I think there's something similar in base game as well. Basically, you're quite a bit slower in researching air stuff. You have more naval mission efficiency, which is good for your naval bombers and for your carrier planes. But it comes at a cost of you lose a lot more experience when your wings lose men, and inexperienced wings are just much worse, meaning it is going to be very important for Japan to only commit air wings that are at least trained. So people, train your air wings before you deploy them. Sorry, before you commit them to battle, please. And of course, industry is also shit, more or less. Japan has industrialized rapidly, but not to the same degree as its European contemporaries, and it has always been hamstrung by the fact that Japan itself, the Japanese archipelago, is relatively poor in resources required for a modern economy, a heavy economy in this case. So that is part of its problems. Of course, this can also be fixed. Let's keep going. And now, Imperial influence. This is a bit of a complicated one, but I'll try to break it down. Japan has factions vying for control. There are, I believe, 4 factions. There's the army, there's the navy, there's the civilian branch, and there's the zaibatsus, the industrial side of things. So those 4 are all jockeying for position. Those positions go from, I believe, we'll see it in a minute, but dominant, meddling, and then sidelined or something. They have different levels, different tiers of how much influence they have, and depending on their influence levels, this national spirit adjusts. Higher influence levels gives you certain bonuses, but they come with trade-offs. If you, for instance, in this case, piss off the army, guns become more expensive, artillery becomes more expensive, etc. If you mess with the Zaibatsus, sure, you might build civs more quickly, you might build infrastructure more quickly, but it's going to be much more expensive to change out of economy laws, meaning you're gonna have to do a balancing act. You're really going to try and pit these sides against each other. They're going to be vying for control. It's your job now to handle them and to steer them in such a way as to make the best of a bad situation and maybe even profit from these various things. For instance, in the early days, you might want to give more land, you might want to give more favor to the Zaibatsus and the civilian faction because you might need that stability and that political power gain to build out your cabinet, to have high production numbers. You want the Zaibatsus so you can build a couple more civs and that industry, and as you slowly ramp up for war, you're shifting towards the military taking control, or the navy, depending on what your goal is for that campaign, so you can build more of those ships, or as you can build more of those guns. So we'll have to wait and see. I guess people with a spreadsheet will eventually figure out what's the optimum path, and I can't wait for someone who did math for me, because I don't like math. And here we go, the Imperial influence. They're taking a heavy dose of inspiration from the German mechanic, where you have the inner circle, only in this case it is Hirohito, the Emperor himself, who has, well, the Emperor himself doesn't do shit. All he likes is playing with his goldfish and his toy trains, but he is the figurehead. It's his job, quote unquote, to balance these factions against each other, and here you can see. Now, what I am a little skeptical about, and you'll read this in the Dev Diary, you might notice it in some of the screenshots, it's not entirely clear to me how we're going to be balancing these, because there will be focuses that are locked out depending on influence levels. That's one thing. This is giving me slight, just ever so slight flashbacks to the Switzerland focus tree, which I hated. And I've seen, for now, again, this cost is not fixed. It is very much a work in progress. But there's going to be a timer between when you can endorse or suppress a faction. So you can't just switch on a dime, which makes sense, I guess. But it's also going to be incredibly expensive. I saw a tooltip saying 100 political power to click that endorse or suppress button. That's steep. We're gonna need to figure out just how to balance this. I'm a little skeptical. This could be really good, or this could be another Switzerland where you need an Excel sheet to play the country. There's also 4 stages. You go from meddling, subdued is the lowest, then you become meddling, influential, finally dominating. Only one can be dominating at any one time. It makes sense, you can't all be dominating. And then depending on how things go, let's see, 1 dominating, 2 can be influential, and then the others have to be either meddling or subdued. And depending on how influential those factions are, the buffs they give become more powerful. The downsides that come with that also become worse, in which case, well, you can see Zaibatsus can make it really expensive to change your economy laws, but 20% civ construction speed is Dankus will love that. And some focuses are not locked out by the mechanic, but they will directly influence the various balances of power. For instance, this one, the Northern Front, will give a little bit of influence to the army mechanic, making them go from meddling to influential. And inter-service rivalry means the Navy is going to get a little bit more pissed. So we're going to have to make all of those changes and balance them off against each other, because the payoff might not be worth the expense. And you're going to have to figure that out. And then here you can see some examples of focuses being locked by the mechanic. Like I mentioned before, they are only available if a navy, for instance, is not subdued, or if the army is at least influential, and that's the only way to proceed down those focuses. I haven't seen the full focus tree yet. I'm sure we'll see that further down the line, and we'll know some more. But it would be very unfortunate to have like a full tree or full branch of the tree locked because of one focus that you couldn't do because you mistimed something, and then you're locked waiting for 100 political power or enough time to pass so you can make a faction the correct level of influence. I hope it's a little intuitive. Yeah, as you can see here, the decisions take 100 political power. Now these numbers, none of these numbers are final, so take that with a grain of salt. But you can see here, they cost 100 political power. And there's also a modifier here that says Hirohito has recently interfered in Imperial faction matters. So that's like an internal timer. There's several focuses you might know already that have like time gates between them. This is a similar thing where decisions are time gated. I don't know how long that time gate is, but if this is on like a 6-month timer, you're not turning this ship around on a dime, which makes sense, yes. But you can definitely fuck yourself if you don't really plan things out ahead. So I'm slightly worried by just how much planning is going to be required just to play and enjoy Japan. And if you get factions that are influential enough, they'll start giving you these little shitty little missions that we know and love from Italy. Basically, they're going to ask you for stuff. Yeah, they want you to change the trade law. And if you do that, they'll get 15 political power. If you don't do that, they lose influence. So this is a way to spice things up, but on a 365-day timer, that's a lot of planning that's going to go into it. Yeah, that payoff is not worth it, my dude. And now, the glorious industrial branch. Let's see if we can zoom in a little. So it all starts with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and then it splits up into 3 separate branches. Well, 2 really. We have the all the way over there in that corner. My hand goes off the screen. Yep. The Ministry of Colonial Affairs, where you can build up your colonial holdings such as Manchukuo, as well as the stuff you might have taken in the South Seas. I believe Japan starts with a bunch of islands, and it might also upgrade stuff that you take from other people. I'm not sure, I'll have to check once I get my hands on this. We can then choose to continue Takahashi, this guy's politics, or increase armament spending. Basically, the choice is civs or mills. Which do you want first? And then you continue down the standard industrial branch, where you can then also side with one or several. You don't have to choose between these. You can get all of them if you want to make the time investment. These are 4 different zaibatsus. Basically large industrial conglomerates in Japan. And that leads you down here. Several of these delicious different options that actually do look quite nice. They do look like they might actually be worth doing. And then the zaibatsus that you can then choose to associate yourself with. You can pick all of them if you want to make the investment, or just one of them and then continue down the tree. Some of these rewards are actually quite nice. These can be quite impactful. They only give you like a single factory, but the bonuses are not necessarily terrible. And then focuses will change according to how influential certain factions are. This is an example of what will change. For instance, if the zaibatsus are influential when you get to the focus called Fund the Riken Institute. If they are influential, you get a free nuclear facility, which is nice. If they're not influential, it just gets you everything else except for that nuclear facility. There's a couple of examples of this in the military branch as well. So it is a pretty nice touch. So on one hand, I like the variety this gives me. On the other hand, it comes back to my instinctual fear of math. And then the last focus in the branch is basically autarky, but Japanese. If you want to fix your economy and not have it be shit, get all the resources in Southeast Asia and declare yourself to be an economic miracle. If you meet the requirements, and they are steep, your economy turns from dog shit to quite good, actually. You're gonna have to go to war with the Allies. You cannot get all of this from China, and not from the Soviets either, at least not in the Far East. You're gonna have to go to war with the Allies for the oil, for the rubber, and the tungsten, but the oil, rubber, and tungsten, I know you will be able to get from Malaysia and the Dutch East Indies, so you'll be good on that front. If you want to fix your economy, you're gonna have to conquer. A nice list of new MIOs. If you recognize any of these, that might be because these companies, many of these companies, still in business. I do like all the icons though. They've done a good job with these. These look quite nice. And then finally, the military, what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. And it all starts with the Imperial Defense Plan that unlocks everything else. Now, this is actually a quite interesting tree. It starts with the Imperial Defense Plan, and it basically primes you for war with your neighbors. If you declare war on a neighbor or the neighbor of a vassal, within like the first 90 days of declaring the war, you get a 10% attack bonus against that country, 10% breakthrough against that country. That is incredibly powerful, especially against stuff like China that's usually, we'll have to wait and see, usually militarily inferior to you. So it's just stomping down even harder. And if you declare war on a country that has capital ships, you also get 10% capital ship attack against that country and spotting speed. Depending on how you like to build your navy, that can be impactful, but not as impactful as that army bonus. Speaking of the army, we start off with the army branch, and we can there choose. First one is mutually exclusive already. Reform the army. Icon of a tank. So you want to make your tanks less shit. Want to have some glorious Japanese armor. I don't think I want to. And the other one is Reliant Infantry Offensive. Basically, your choice is going to be armor or infantry with artillery. Now, realistically, it makes very little sense for Japan to ever pick armor. So depending on which way you go, these are your options. You can get tank investment, infantry investment, or artillery investment, and your army spirit is going to change accordingly. All the way on the left is when you go with armor, center is where you go with infantry, and right is if you're going to lean on artillery. And of course, no Japan game without the spirit of Bushido, which unlocks the Grand Banzai Charge. That's no way to run an army, boys. That's no way to run an army at all. And then further down, you're gonna have more choices that are really not choices. These are there for the AI, I assume, but if you ever find yourself having to give yourself attack and defense on core territory, something has gone terribly wrong, because that's the islands. Unless they wildly change where Japan's core are, that is the home islands and a couple of shitty islands surrounding it. And if that's where you're fighting your desperate battles, brother, something's gone terribly wrong. I think in almost any situation, you're gonna go with strengthening the supply lines, just unless those numbers change or the effects change. I see 0 point in pivoting towards defensive measures. Anyway, the Air Force. This is all about fixing the problems the Air Force has, namely its inefficiency. Your goal is going to be heading down to unifying the Air Forces, and along the way you're going to make a couple of choices. You're going to be developing new fighters, glorious Zeros, and you're going to be getting modern bombers, with the choice then being sturdy aircraft, meaning a little bit more air defense, or you want long operational range. You are going to be sacrificing, I believe, agility and maybe defense for additional range. Yeah, looking down here, this is for our glorious Mitsubishi Zero, which we can then improve in the 7075 aluminum alloy. Very nice, very lovely. Love to see it. So we're going to be ramping up that Mitsubishi MIO quite quickly with these focuses, which is good. Air is king. And then, of course, something similar for the bombers as well, Kawasaki bombers. Then we get to this one, sturdy aircraft, operational range, and the Z bombers. Just from looking at this number, I already know what you're going to want to pick. Sturdy aircraft is just bad. They're going to change the air zones for the region. They're reworking that stuff. They're going to also rework the Pacific War. But in general, you want as much operational range out of your fighters and your bombers as you can, just for mission efficiency. If they can cover the entire air zone, you have more mission efficiency. Secondly, the more range the aircraft has, the less range fixes you're going to have to apply. Here we go. We can then unify the air forces and get rid of some of the terrible modifiers, make this thing a little bit better. We get all our aviators into a single room, bash their heads together and say, work together like two feuding brothers, put them in like their friendly hug t-shirt. One t-shirt with two people in it. There we go. You won't come out until you're friends. And of course, it wouldn't be Japan without the Navy. And here I am excited. I'm excited because I see things here. A nuclear project. Nuclear. Heat-seeking missiles? Yes. And then we have some choices down here. Like the top basic setup for the war. Southern Fronts is a preparatory focus that gets you some bonuses once you do launch your Southeast Asian offensives, your naval invasions. Technical department is just more, I believe, research speed or special project speed, so it's not that impactful. The big ones here are focus on aircraft carriers, balanced naval approach, and battleship initiative. Let me scroll down a little bit. So these are the top two. Not super impactful though. Southern Fronts might be very nice. 25% invasion speed is pretty good if you're going to launch a full, like, all-out assault on Southeast Asia. Make things go a little bit more quickly, plus some nice marine bonuses. And here's the big ones. The focuses you'll take, these are mutually exclusive. Do I go all in on air, all in on battleships, or do I get the Goldilocks zone that's just right down the middle? I don't know, because I like all three of these approaches. And what's more, depending on which of these three you choose, special focus down the line also changes in a very impactful way. This one, the Naval Armaments Program. Depending on what option you chose up top, you now get either 4 production lines worth of Shokaku class carriers, impactful depending on how much progress is in the production line already, speeds things up. Or you get 2 Shokakos and 2 Yamatos. Or you get 4 production lines of Yamato class super heavy battleships. It's nice, a lot of choices here that will actually matter. You don't just pull 4 super heavy battleships out of your ass. This is an investment. And now, what we've all been waiting for, politics, the best part of any country. There's a foreign policy, the leftmost, and I really wish I could get this on screen properly. There we go. The leftmost is all about the northern strategy, all in on the Soviets. Then we have the southern strategy, the historical option where you go to Southeast Asia and just yoink everything. And then there's a third one here with Chinese and European allies, enemies, frenemies, situationships, basically. And they're all unlocked through a single focus, mandatory up there, where you deal with the Kohoda faction. All the way up top, this is the first thing you'll have to do is deal with the Kohoda faction. And depending on what your options, what your choices are there, it branches off into alt history, weird and wacky, or vaguely historical alt history, or just our timeline with a slight change. First order of business is, of course, Saburo Aizawa's trial, which is in this case still ongoing, and depending on how you handle that, you can get different outcomes for the eventual coup attempt by the Kohoda faction. Do you purge it? Do you align with it? Does something else happen that's completely out of left field? I don't know. They haven't released that dev diary yet, but we'll find out soon enough. And all of these are shared with the eventual Kohoda path as well, so that's nice to know. The Northern and Southern Doctrine are no longer mutually exclusive. You can do both depending on either time, so if you start one, you have to wait to do the other, or influence in faction. So if you start one, you can then also immediately do the other if the faction influence is just right. I would not want to fight all of Southeast Asia and the Soviets at the same time unless you have an excellent opportunity. Ooh, and there's also dynamic operations against and occupations of the enemy, allowing you to perform a raid against the US base in Pearl Harbor. I do hope they have their aircraft carriers there this time. And you might be wondering about the conflict with China. And I regret to inform you that it will no longer be possible to simply never go to war with China. There will be war with China, and it will be triggered via event in this case, unless you do it yourself manually. If you as the Glorious Emperor do not go to war with China, the Kwantung Army will go to China on your behalf. Now there's going to be ways to delay this, there's going to be ways to expedite this depending on what you want, and they don't say it, but I can see it right there. there's gonna be a way to prevent it by doing the focus of doing the Kwantung army, which I haven't found in the focus tree so far. So maybe it's alt history. Depending on what you want to do, you can then ensure a temporary peace deal with China to delay the whole thing, or expedite the whole thing by sending more troops to the Kwantung garrison and stacking the East Hebei garrisons. It really depends on what you are looking to do. And these are some of the other options we have in that foreign policy branch. An expedition to Tibet. Now, this is more of a thing if you've won in China, I would say. The Mongolian Independence Army. This will allow you to stir the pot in Mongolia, setting up for a coup. So I'm hoping this will be like a peaceful special military operation to pry Mongolia away from the Comintern and do something with Menkukuo. Not Manchukuo, that other puppet. Menkukuo, Outer Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, that sort of stuff. Now, this is a focus that will allow us to go to war with the Soviets and get us some claims on the Soviet Far East. Pretty cool. Unlocks the decision for a separate peace with the Soviet Union if we can get control. So, depending on just how ballsy you want to play it or how well the war in East Asia is going, you could go for a quick blitz offensive against the Soviets while they're bogged down with the Germans. Smash and grab. Occupy what you need to occupy for the focus, peace out, and walk away with half of Siberia if you are lucky or good enough to do it. And then have those forces available for the rest of Southeast Asia or wherever your conquests take you. Pretty cool. And now on to domestic politics. That's so much better than foreign policy. First of all, we're going to be documenting Japan's slow or not so slow descent into fascism from a non-aligned system to a very, very fascist system with a consecutive parade of short-lived prime ministers. This is the historical path. Koki Hirota takes over after your OG prime minister steps down, and people don't like what he has to say. So he's very short-lived. And then almost immediately you're going to have to make the choice. Do you go left side and side with the civilian branch of government? Or do you go right side and go all in on the military? Historically, Japan did go for the right side. So this is where the army is. This is where the civilian side of things is. It's going to depend on if you value some of these. That then leads to two different mini branches, just a couple of focuses. But the Japan-China Manchukuo Alliance and the New Order in East Asia. Both of these create a faction for you. That is not the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. We'll get to that. This gives you the right side is basically gives you a fascist faction. What those factions look like and all that is going to have to be shown to us in the Dev Diary for their new faction system. All I know is this gives us a faction. All the way on the left, that also gives us a faction with China. So that's a bit alt history right there. Not sure if that's like a short-lived thing, because we are going to war with China. That seems inevitable. So it could be a short-lived thing like they did with Götterdämmerung and the Germans. I don't know. I will have to see. But these are your choices, and then it all opens up further down. Mostly bonuses all around. So not really sure what all of this gives us. Take a good long look at these, but it does smell like Japan can get a lot of stuff from this. And this just gives you a variety of different prime ministers depending on what way you go. And also different bonuses, different decisions that you can do as you pick and choose your focuses. Here we go with the factions. We have the New Order in East Asia, which gives us the faction called New Order in East Asia. Very clever. And then initiative points for the faction. I don't know what those are. I really would like to know what those are. That basically just adds your puppets, I guess. And then the Japan-China Manchukuo Alliance gives you a faction with them. Creates world tension. China joins that faction. But it does look like it only lasts for 730 days. Unless I'm reading that wrong. But I think once it expires, some sort of modifier is going to wear off for either you or the Chinese AI. And they're most likely going to leave the faction. And there we go. We can also, later on, morph that faction into the East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. depending on what we chose first, the outcomes of this are going to be different. And there's a whole bunch of focuses here that are all about exploiting the land in our newfound Asian subjects. Yes. And then further on, at the bottom of the tree, comes the big choice. Who is going to run the show for these wars? Is it going to be the historical option, Tojo, man of the army? Is it going to be Yamato, man of the navy? Or the one and only true choice, the most based option possible? This is very monarchy pilled. You can have the chrysanthemum throne. Hirohito will take command. Now, Hirohito was in no way, shape, or form qualified to do anything close to govern, but he has that option in this case, and I have already figured out which way I'm going to go. Because damn it, you cannot stop me from taking the monarchist option. It also looks like he has the bonuses I like the most. Yeah, different leaders with different bonuses. Tojo, Yamamoto, and then Hirohito. I like what I see. And then at the bottom, there's a couple more things here about steering the war effort. Either things are going really poorly over to the left side of things and you get the advanced 100 million fireballs, that ain't good, or things are going really, really good and you proclaim the Eternal Kingdom. I hope to never need the left side of this. You never know. Disaster saves. I hope to never need the advanced 100 million fireballs because those stats look nice, but all of them are only worthwhile if you're losing. You don't want to be losing if, as Japan. Once the enemy has set foot on the home islands, things are not good. Not to mention that stability loss. That's crippling. You're not coming back from that. Or the Eternal Kingdom. That's nice, but by the time you get to the Eternal Kingdom, it's quite pointless. Ooh, it also goes away if you ever reach 50% surrender progress. Ah, would you get it back if you then unsurrender? Because that would be annoying. Oh well, it's nice to have. Anyway, that is the end of this dev diary. It is a chonker. It is massive. I recommend you check it out down below. And if you're interested in this DLC at all, check out my code down below as well. Use code BITTERSTEEL at the Paradox store. Gets you a Steam key at the same price as Steam directly from Paradox. Everybody wins. Paradox gets a sale. You get a game. I get 12% of the proceeds. And the most important person of all, the Belgian taxman, gets to claim more of my money. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope to see you for the next video as well. Goodbye.